Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Belmont. How excited we are to have another evening with Tzvi Sperber from JRoots. It's going to be a wonderful evening. Wherever you're watching from, of course, it's always wonderful to hear from you. So if you can, put a comment in the comments bar. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us who's watching. And of course, shout outs to JRoots as well to thank you for what's going to be another awesome evening. Last week, we were in Hebron. We were in that wonderful, incredible Hebron, and we were taken around by Tzvi. And of course, this week, nothing different. We're very, very, very excited. I just want to explain again, just a little bit, just to bring Tzvi in a second, just to explain. For various reasons, 4G, 3G, Wi-Fi reasons, light reasons, although we wanted to do this as a live broadcast and hook Tzvi up actually live in Tzfat as we're talking, but it's just not possible. And also we wouldn't be able to cover as much ground in the time. This way, Tzvi went down a few days ago. He went to Tzfat, did all the recordings, and he's going to be joining us now from Bet Shemesh. And we're very excited to hear that. And I'm going to remind you again, also, I'm going to flash up my email address. So if you have a question throughout the presentation and you want to get the answer to Tzvi, so the question to Tzvi and you want to get the answer, I've got my phone here. Normally I don't encourage phone use in classes and in sessions, but please do send me an email and I will do my best to get that question to Tzvi, depending on the number of questions that we have. So without further ado, I'm going to say to Tzvi, welcome back to Belmont.
Hello, Belmont. Hi, Rabbi Levine. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Baruch Hashem, I'm good. Thank God. We're doing well. You know,
Yeah?
I was tonight happens to be a very auspicious night for me to be able to be with Belmont. It's this evening is my father's yard site.
Right,
And
wow.
my father, as I told you last week, was one of the founding members of Belmont. I know that my mother was the secretary in the office, ran out of our house for, I don't know, lots of years as a kid. I asked my mother actually the other day whether or not they became members of Belmont before England won the World Cup or after in 1966.
66.
Couldn't quite remember, but she said it certainly may well have been a gift of after the World Cup they became members of Belmont. But so tonight is I'll do this in Lezecha Avi Mori in memory of my father, Shlom Ben Mordechai.
For sure. And see all the incredible work that you do all over the world, how you inspire so many people about our history, which is your passion, about our land, which is your passion. What a zechut, what a merit for him and his neshama, his soul, Be'ezrat Hashem. Tonight we dedicate to him. What a wonderful sentiment and what a perfect timing. Who knew when we talked about it 2 months ago? But really, we're excited to go to Tzfat. How many times do you think you've been to Tzfat before?
I don't know, but I will tell you that we used to live in Tzfat as well. We spent time in Tzfat when I ran a program called Live Not to Live Not, myself and my wife. So we would run between Jerusalem and Tzfat. Okay, spent a lot of time in Tzfat.
How long's the drive?
The drive between Jerusalem to Tzfat, well, when we were doing it was quite a while. But today with the number 6 highway from Bet Shemesh to Tzfat, it's 2 hours, two and a quarter hours, that's it.
How long did you live in Tzfat for?
We were on and off for 2 years.
Wow. What years were you there?
That's a good question.
Make it up. None of us are going to know.
Yeah, it's probably 20 years ago.
So I lived in Tzfat for 3 months.
Wow.
In March, well, 3 months. It would have been January to March of the beginning of the year 2000.
Wow.
So that's 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
On my year off with FZY, Machon, they sent 2/3 of our group to Carmiel to do development town work, and they sent a small group of us. Like, there can't have been more than about 15 of us that went to live in apartments in Tzfat for 3 months, and we worked in the Amal Echad school in Tzfat, and we worked with Druze, and it was an amazing experience. We worked with the Tzofim, and we did appreciate what we had, but I don't think I truly appreciated what we were living on top of, literally, in that beautiful city. And so many people, I'm sure most of the people watching, and we've got I would say I don't know exact numbers because I don't know exactly how many people are in the. We got almost 100 devices watching currently, so we can assume that's at least 150 people, at least, if not 3,000 people. Who knows, right?
Obviously,
but I'm sure all the people that are watching,
Jewish world is watching
the
Belmont.
whole Jewish world is watching Belmont tonight, of course, right? Well, we're very much on the map, but most people have been to Tzfat, and not only have most people been to Tzfat, most people know a bit about Tzfat, a bit about the history and how special it is. But when you go with someone that really knows and that really is able to open up the beauty, the mysticism, the secrets, this holiness of it, then I know that tonight we're in for a treat. So they don't want to hear from me. They hear me all the time. So I'm going to, without further ado, hand over to you, Tzvi. I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to leave my email address up there for a minute, and I'll keep it coming backwards and forwards as and when we need it. So I'll see you on the other side.
Okay. Great. So we're just going to do a quick introduction to Tzfat before we start the video. And really, you should, those of us that have been to Tzfat will know that nestled up in the forest of the Upper Galilee is a beautiful city which is called Tzfat in Hebrew, or Safed, which is the way they write it in English. It's packed with history, with spirituality, with mysticism, and its origins go way, way back. In fact, it's one of the only places that we have a complete Jewish presence in that city since the time of the Maccabees, since 2,100 years old, even though we have time periods before that we know of evidence. However, before really the Crusader time period, the archaeological evidence is very scarce. So we have to utilize various different ideas of what we have. So Josephus, the man, of course, who writes about the Roman presence in Jerusalem, and we're coming into the 3 weeks in next week, which will deal with the destruction of the temple. He mentions about Tzfat. He actually calls it Safef, which he says there are Roman soldiers there. We attribute it to the city of Tzfat. We then have 2 Talmuds. We have the Talmud Bavli, which is written in Iraq, and the Talmud Yerushalmi that is written in Israel. And in the Talmud Yerushalmi, it's mentioned actually the city of Tzfat as a place that on the new moon, when they used to declare it from the temple, they would, in order to be able to get that message to the people who were living in Iraq and various other places all over the diaspora, they would light bonfires. And what would happen is the bonfire would be lit. On the next mountain where it saw that bonfire, they would light their bonfire. And that's how the message went from one to the other, if you want like smoke signals. One of those in the Sechet Rosh Hashanah, in the tractate called Rosh Hashanah, it talks about in the Yerushalmi Talmud that Tzfat was one of those places as well. Tzfat appears in poems of people who were expelled from Israel after the Roman time period, after the destruction of the Second Temple, and will appear again throughout that time period. The actual writings that we then have are found in the Cairo Geniza, which talks about the 11th and the 13th century, that there's quite a big presence of people in Tzfat. However, everything will change when we come to the Crusaders. And the Crusaders are going to be the people that are going to put Tzfat on the map big time. And we're going to start here at the Mitsudah now. So if I can ask Ari Levine to start the video. And again, there are times within the video that where it's breaking that we'll be able to start. We're going to take questions. Please.
Welcome to the city of Tzfat. So we've come up to the highest point in Tzfat over here to be able to show you, number one, what it meant to be in Tzfat. Tzfat lit spot to be able to have an overlook, a view. As you can see, the view of the Upper Galilee over here. Har Canaan is behind us this way. We've got a lot of beautiful views all around, a 360-degree view from where we are. Lit spot to be able to take that view in. Now remember, the first people that are going to do that and recognize this importance over here is without a doubt going to be the ones who are going to change a lot of this country at the time is going to be the Crusaders. Richard the Lionheart is going to come to the land of Israel. He's going to go from the Crusades towards Jerusalem, and then he's going to have his attention towards the Galilee. His main part that he wants to be able to take is the port of Akko. And he does understand that Akko itself is the gateway to the Mediterranean. But he wants to also get all the riches from Damascus. The road from Damascus to Akko will run through some very dangerous areas filled with Bedouins. So you need to have a fort in one place. Where do you have that fort? For two reasons. Number one, to protect the road. And number two, to take the tax from the people who are traveling on the road. That will be here in the city of Tzfat. They build what's known in Hebrew as a Metsudah, a fortress over here on this hillside, which commands a view over all of the roads that would run towards Akko and run towards Damascus. The group of Crusaders that will move in here are a group called the Templars. Some of you are probably more familiar with the idea of the Templars from a group of Germans who will be known as the German Templars, that will be either in Emek Rephaim in Jerusalem, or in the German colony in Haifa, or in a place in Tel Aviv called Sarona. All of them were part of those known as the Templar. They were living in Templar buildings, but they were part of the Templar sect. They, of course, will be expelled by the British for flying swastikas here in Israel during the Second World War. And they'll be sent out of Israel at that time. There'll be a prisoner swap between the British and the Germans so they can get back their people. The British army and the Germans can get back their people from the land of Israel. In 1266, if we go all the way back, how was the Metsudah conquered? How was this fortress conquered? Well, they didn't stay here forever, the Crusaders, as you know. And the Muslims came here. When the Muslims arrived here, the man called Baibas came to this place over here. He couldn't conquer the fortress. It was too well protected. But the Crusaders saw one after the other their fortresses falling around, and they realized they weren't going to have much future here. They came to an agreement, and they were able to leave here safely, and the Metsudah fell into Muslim hands. The Metsudah will stay standing, but pretty much not really used. That is all until the 19th century in 1837, the major earthquake, where the Metsudah came tumbling down. It didn't come crumbling down in the 17th century in the earthquake, but only in 1837 in its earthquake. Tzfat was totally destroyed. When you walk around the old city of Tzfat that we're going to be walking around today, you'll notice lots of these buildings that we're going to be seeing. Some of them are built from the bricks of the Metsudah, where they took them from this fortress and carried on the history of Tzfat from the 12th century to the 20th. As you can see now behind me, the beautiful view of the Galilee. We're in the upper part of the Galilee. Of course, the Galilee is split into two. It's split into upper and lower. The lower Galilee we've passed through on the drive up here. We're now in the upper part of the Galilee. Tzfat happens to be the city that's built on the highest area of Israel, over 900 meters above sea level. Okay, it's the city of Tzfat. And we're going to go in now to get the introduction to the city itself. But just so you can see in the distance this way, over here, you'll notice the hills that are continuing onwards. If you can see in the very back, there's like a white area with a ball on the top over there. We're looking towards Lebanon. Okay, Tzfat, of course, unfortunately, took its full round of being hit quite badly during the Second Lebanon War. And this is because Lebanon's not far from where we are right now. Okay, but we're going to go in and deal with the city of Tzfat today. Come this way. We are now in the city of Tzfat, overlooking Meron. And the reason the city of Tzfat is built here is partly because of what's on Meron. Though it's very hard to make out from where we are right now, but on the base of the city of the hill of Meron over there is the tomb of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, of course, man who is linked to a very beautiful festival that we have every single year on the 33rd day of the Omer, the 33rd day of counting between Pesach and Shavuot. The man who will bring Kabbalah into the world, the Zohar, the Eish, the fire into the world. This man, okay, will be buried here. Now, just like we were in Hebron with the Torah, and we spoke about Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, another place that we definitely know that person is buried in is over here in Meron. Because of the inspiration of Meron and what he brought to the world, they came to build the city of Tzfat. It should be no coincidence to you that there are so many Kabbalists that come to this place. Remember, we spoke about the 4 different holy cities.
We spoke about Yerushalayim, Hebron, Tiberia, and Tzfat. Jerusalem, Hebron, Tiberias, and the city of Tzfat. Tzfat gets the ruach, gets the spirit, gets the spirituality, not just the wind which is here, which you can feel now and probably hear on the camera, but gets the spirituality. You know, Tzfat stands for many things. And unfortunately, when you're here today and you see how Tzfat has no one around, I mean, we're literally walking on these streets by ourselves with a few other people who are students that are studying here in the Midrashot and the Yeshivot, the different schools that are still going on here. But apart from that, we're by ourselves here. And when they talk about Tzfat, it's the acronym of three letters which make up the word Sarich Po Tayarim. They need here tourists in the city of Tzfat. Need to have people to come back here, to come back to this beautiful place over here of the city of Tzfat, with the beautiful views that you see here, the air, and the tremendous atmosphere that's here.
Okay, so you saw at the beginning the entrance to Tzfat being up in the Upper Galilee, close to Lebanon. Actually, from a hill not far from there, you can see the whole width of the land of Israel as well. And certainly in the winter, you can see from the Mutsudah, the Chelmon, the place where the mountain with the snow on, which of course is the border also of Syria. We just introduced ourselves now to the 16th century, to the Kabbalists that are about to arrive into Tzfat. And we gave an acronym of the word Sadi Pei Taf. Sarich Po Tayarim, we need here tourists. But you should know when the Kabbalists come, it's a different story. It's not just Tzfat of they need tourists, because they didn't at that time. But it becomes the Tzfat of Tzadik, which stands for Tzitzit, those fringes that we wear on a four-corner garment. Pei stands for Peyot. They're the side curls that you see the Hasidim walking around with as well today, much longer. And Taf stands for the Torah. So we're about to enter into a new age and a new world with a man who's going to arrive here, a man called Rabbi Isaac Luria. His acronym of his name is going to be known as the Ari Adonenu Rabbi Yitzchak, our master, Rabbi Yitzchak, a man who really literally is going to change Judaism at that time. So we're going to be standing outside his shore. I'm just going to say one other word just quickly before we start now, to say that because of Corona, so much of Tzfat was closed, completely shut down, and we couldn't get into the places. So we've added some pictures into the videos to be able to show you. Hopefully, we should be able to get out of this Corona and be able to take you right into those places in person. Let's carry on with the video. So we're now standing outside the Ari Synagogue over here. Unfortunately, because of Corona, most of the Bate Knesset are closed now. You can't just go in. There's no tourism in the city of Tzfat. It's very sad to see. The roads are empty. There's no one in the alleyways where there would usually be many, many people sitting here waiting even to get inside the synagogue of Tzfat that's over here. The Ari has two synagogues. Well, in fact, he has three. He has the Ari Ashkenazi, which is here. He has the Sephardi one, which is down by the cemetery. And then there was a Bet Midrash that was known as the Bet Midrash Ari, the place where he would study Torah. The Ari is a very interesting person. Now, let's try and explain who he is. Because the truth is, until he arrives to the city of Tzfat, Tzfat is an important place, yes, without a doubt. But it's going to jump leaps and bounds as soon as the Ari arrives here. There are many people in their lives who are attributed to have met Elijah the prophet, spent time with Elijah the prophet. We can go through various different rabbis. I can take you to Krakow, meet you to different personalities who are connected to the stories with Elijah the prophet as well. But let's deal with Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, and the Ari. He's met him 3 times, Elijah the prophet. First time is at the Brit Milah. Now, as we said, grows up in a very poor family, but his father is a very pious Jew in Jerusalem. At that time, you should be well aware that Jerusalem was not so favorable to Ashkenazi Jews. The Ashkenazim were a group of people that had arrived in Israel with different dress than their Muslim neighbors, and certainly than the other Sephardi Jews that were around. When the Sephardi Jews came to the land of Israel at the time of the Turks, they fitted in much better. The Ashkenazim, not so well. But the Ari's father was a very pious man, as we said, and he had, thank God, a son. The night before the Brit, there's something called the Brit Yitzchak, and he learnt all night over the cot of his little new baby. There he was told do not start the Brit Milah until I arrive. He didn't know who it was that had spoken to him, but it was Eliyahu Hanavi. The Brit Milah starts in the morning. People have finished shul. They're waiting for the Brit Milah. 10 people. People have got to go to work. Can't hang around. One of them leaves. They're now down to 9. They don't know what's going to happen. How are they going to perform this Brit Milah? You can perform it without a minyan, as unfortunately we've seen as well during Corona. But you can perform it without a minyan. But they wanted to have a minyan to be able to say Kaddish. In walks this man with a long white beard. Sits down in the chair. Nobody knows who he is. Takes the baby, becomes the Sunday. And there they do the Brit Milah. This will be the first time that Eliyahu Hanavi will meet the Ari Kadosh. As we said before, this poor family, the father passes away, they can't support themselves in Jerusalem, and therefore they go over to the largest Jewish community at that time. The largest Jewish community, there are 2 of them actually. One of them happens to be in the city of Gaza, surprisingly enough, but the larger area is a Jewish community in the area close to Israel is in Egypt. He goes to Egypt, he starts to learn there, and he becomes a very holy man himself. The Ari takes time out of, if you want, of society, moves out to the fields, moves out towards the Nile, spends his time eating just reeds and weeds in the area of the Nile, learning Torah day and night. There are many different things that are written about the Ari, that he would go up to heaven every night, but we're not going to get into that now. Tzfat is a city of legends, city of stories, and therefore we're telling you these. But one of those he learned with his chevruta, his study partner. And his study partner couldn't make it one night. He sat down to learn again, and surprisingly enough, once again, he was met by Eliyahu Hanavi, who told him as follows: you need to come to the city of Tzfat to teach Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was here in the city of Tzfat, who was the head of the city of Tzfat at the time, Kabbalah. Elijah the prophet has spoken, so you leave. And he came to the city of Tzfat. He arrives here in 1570. He will be here for 4 years only. But during those 4 years, he's going to change completely what we know today of, if you want, Jewish practice, so much of it. And so many people are so connected to part of the Jewish practice that he institutes. What does the Ari Kadosh do? So when the Ari Kadosh arrives here, in the city of Tzfat was a man known as the Ramak of Moshe Cordova, an unbelievable Kabbalist himself. And the reason they had come here, of course, is because of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's grave, which is a course that we've already shown you, and we're going to be speaking about more. The Ramak, who writes a sefer called Pardes Rimonim, will be here only for a very short time and learn with the Ari, Kabbalah, Zohar at the time. He will die. In the first year, the Ari is here, and the Ari basically takes over this and has a very select group of people that will become his Mekubalin, his Kabbalist. The Ari will continue to teach him. And one night, he goes over to the study house opposite this synagogue over here. And that is where he will learn for the 3rd time, or meet for the 3rd time, Elijah the prophet, as they learn all night in this place over here. The synagogue itself, which stands, some of it from the 16th century, but much of it, again, was taken over, as we said, in the 19th century by another group of people. But let's try and tell the story of the synagogue, because unfortunately you can't go in there, so I'm going to be showing you photos just so you can see it. But inside, as you walk inside, there's a bimah there. It looks like the base of a ship, like the hull of a ship. As you go around, you see an ark. The ark is partly original, but the decorations around it are not, and they come from Italy. But you'll see at the top part of the Ari Synagogue a face, which looks like a lion. Ari, Aryeh, the lion. But it looks like a human face. You'll also notice there is a Kisei Eliyahu, a chair, Elijah's chair where the Brit Milah takes place there. And I want to just touch on a couple of things here. When you look at the bimah itself, the bimah, which looked like a hull of a ship, the Ari would tell a story as follows. The hull, the bimah, is facing towards the Aron Kodesh, and he would tell this story. And the story he would tell would be this. Those of you that are familiar with Chaim Potak's book, The Chosen, will know this story. A man is on a ship, And as the ship is going through very turbulent waters, all of a sudden, he falls overboard. The captain sees somebody's fallen overboard, and he throws him a rope. And he says to him, hold on to this rope, because if you don't hold on to this rope, you're never going to be able to survive. You're going to drown. The Ari describes that the ship is what we're sailing on as we travel through this world. The rope is the Torah. And if you hold on to Judaism and Jewish cultures and Jewish values and to the Torah, I'll be able to pull you back in. Otherwise, you're going to drown in the world of materialism, in a world that is void of spiritualism. The Ari's Bima is also famous because as you go through the front door that we can see behind us, there is a hole in the Bima. This whole place was overrun in the 1948 War of Independence. The Arabs were here. In fact, there's a very famous Arab that comes from the city of Tzfat who left after the war because Israel finally won the war because of the Haganah here and because of a secret weapon that was called the Davidka that we'll try and talk about a little later on. One of those Arabs, the very famous one, was a man known as Abu Mazen, who runs, of course, the Palestinian Authority today. He lived here in the city of Tzfat. The people were told not to come to this place over here. Don't come and pray here. That's what the Haganah requested from them. Please stay in your houses and pray. But the Jews of Tzfat, who had never missed a day of tefillah, refused not to come to the synagogue, even if it was a risk of their lives of bullets flying back and forward between the Arabs and the Jewish troops that were here. One day during tefillah, at the beginning of Shacharit, in the Amidah, in the silent prayer, a person was in the middle of his blessings, and as you know, you say, Baruch Atah Hashem. When he bowed down for Baruch Atah, a bullet flew over the top of his head and lodged itself into the Bimah. To this very day, it's still there, in that place over there. The Kisei Eliyahu that we have over here, the chair of Elijah, as is with the other Batei Knesset, other synagogues in the city of Tzfat, has the same idea. They say that if a person, unfortunately, is unable to have children, they come here, they say Tehillim, they say the book of Psalms, B'zchut Ari, in the merit of the Ari, that God willing, their prayers will be answered and they'll have children. To this very day, this synagogue, the Ari Ashkenazi, has a minyan mainly on Shabbat, but there is a minyan here in the evenings as well. Okay, and sometimes in the mornings, but more so in the Beit Midrash across. But if you ever come to the synagogue, to the Tzfat over Shabbat, one of those places you want to be able to visit is the Ari Synagogue of the Ashkenazim. We're going to tell you why he has a Sephardi one a little later on. Let's go to the next place. So we've come just outside of the Beit Knesset of the Ari, which we were just at a few moments ago, in order to be able to tell a different story. Now, we're not exactly sure where this takes place, but what we do know is how big the city of Tzfat was. Tzfat, as I'll show you on the map, which you'll see, stretches very far, okay, off to the south of where we are. Around where we are now would have been the end of Tzfat. The Ari Ashkenazi synagogue sits pretty much, as we know, at the edge of the city of Tzfat. Why is it important to us? So it's important to us because of one of his pupils. He had a pupil who was living in the city of Tzfat, who became one of his group of Kabbalists. And that group of Kabbalists, his name was Rabbi Shlomo Halevi Alakabetz. For those of us who are familiar with the prayer, will know the Lachadodi prayer is written with the letters of his name, that each letter starts at the beginning of the verse with Shin, Lamed, etc., that takes us through his name, Shlomo Halevi Alakabetz. He was a Makubal, a Kabbalist that lived here. The Ari said, is it possible that we can just pray in a synagogue? Is that the only place that we can pray? Maybe we need to know that we can touch God everywhere. And one of the things he wanted to be able to do is to be able to institute a beautiful idea. And that was this. They would pray the Mincha prayer in the synagogue. The afternoon prayer would take place in the synagogue. And then they would come out of the city of Tzfat. And they would go into what was known as the fields around Tzfat, what they called the Pardes, because it was where the Kabbalists used to gather. And they would come out in their Shabbat finery, And they would go out into the fields and they would get ready for Shabbat here. Dancing out into the field, they would then take 7 psalms, one for Sunday, one for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then Rabbi Shlomo Levi Alkabetz had written this beautiful tune called Lecha Dodi, which speaks about the idea of the Jewish people being married again every Shabbat. There's some beautiful ideas when it comes to Shabbat. They went to God, Shabbat went to God and said, everyone's got a pair in this world. Sunday has Monday, Tuesday has Wednesday, Thursday has Friday, and there I am standing all alone, Shabbat. God says, yes, but that shows how special you are. Shabbat said, I wanted another pair. And he says, fine, every Shabbat you are to be married once again to the Jewish people. The prayer of Lecha Dodi, of Boi Chala, welcoming in this queen of Shabbat that we talk about every single week. Can you imagine what it was like here? Standing in the fields, praying with the Kabbalists, playing with the man who wrote that prayer. Different tunes that we have, so many of them, that we all know for Lecha Dodi, whether it's a 9 na 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 na, a 9 na 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 na, all the other tunes that you know for Lecha Dodi. So many of them that we're here, that have come out of the place that we're standing at right now. The Ari would stay there for Lecha Dodi, and then they would dance back into town, back to his shul, to finish the evening service, and then welcome in Shabbat. One time when the Ari was out in the fields, he turned to his people and he said as follows to them. Who's coming to Jerusalem with me now? Who's coming? And one said, you know what? I've got a good bottle of wine at home that I'm going to open. I've got guests coming for Shabbat, whatever it may be. Every one of them had a different excuse. And the Ari said this to them. If you would have decided right now to have come, Mashiach would have arrived. The end of 1,500 years at that time of exile would have happened. But you didn't grab the moment. In life, it's about grabbing moments. It's about not letting these things slip through our fingers. It's about taking every opportunity that's given to us and to try and make something from it. The Ari, in the 4 years that he was here, as we said before, will completely change the face of Jewish people as we know it today. We're going to follow through the footsteps now of the Ari as we walk through the different alleyways here.
Okay, we dealt with the Ari partly. I mean, there's so much more to say. Just one word on the Ari. When they asked the Ari, why didn't you write everything down? Okay, because he didn't write down very much. He was only in Tzfat for 4 years before he passed away. He's buried in Tzfat. He has his famous mikveh in Tzfat as well. But the Ari answered as follows when they asked him about the idea of writing things down. The Ari said, if all the sea was ink and all the reeds were quills that I could use in this world, there still wouldn't be enough ink or enough reeds for me to be able to utilize to be able to write down the secrets that I could tell you. There are countless stories about the Ari, and most of them are told to us by a man called Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was one of his most important pupils, a member of the Kabbalistic group. Tzfat is a city of beautiful views and beautiful alleyways, and we're about to now enter into one of the most beautiful ones, which is called Simtat Abuhav, the Abuhav Lane, if you want, leading to the Rabbi Abuhav's synagogue. So we're going to carry on now.
When we stand here on one of the most beautiful routes in the city of Tzfat, it's called the Simtat Abuhav, the road that's leading us towards the Abuhav shul that we're heading towards right now. You can see the walls are totally blue, and the blue is here to remind us of something. When you look at the blue, you're reminded of the tchelet, which would have been on the tzitzit, the purple string, the blue string that would have been on the tzitzit. We say in the third paragraph of the Shema. You look at the blue, you're reminded of the sea. You look at the blue, you're reminded of the sky, where the Kisei HaKavod is, the holy throne.
Most of Tzfat is painted in this beautiful color to keep us in that idea all the time of holiness.
So we're in the Abu Hab Synagogue now. There's lots of people here, thank God. Lots of people coming in and out, different groups, which is showing again that Israel's coming back to a little bit of normality. The Abu Hab Synagogue is reminding us of a man who was born in Toledo, lived his life in Toledo, will die in Portugal. 1492, of course, is the Tzfat, the expulsion of the Jews of Spain. And he will then move from there to Portugal. He's going to, Spain will go through an expulsion as well in 1497. Which is he'll die there, be buried there in 1493. He has left his synagogue in the area of Spain, and around that place, and his synagogue itself will later on be turned into a church. He comes back in a dream to his pupils, and his pupils are told, take my synagogue and move it to the city of Tzfat. Now, there's many different connections here to the city of Tzfat, and many different legends about what goes on. What we do know is what's in this Aron Kodesh here. This is one of the only places in the world where you can see three arcs. 1, 2, 3. In this ark over here, which is the important one, is a Sefer Torah that is written by the hand of the Abu Hab himself. He wrote the Sefer Torah. It was brought by his pupils to the land of Israel, and they brought it here, and they finally arrived in the city of Tzfat. It was originally by the Ari Synagogue. It was then brought to this place once it was built over here. The other Sefer Torah that's in this Aron Kodesh over here was also written by the Sofer Stam, the man who writes the Sefer Torah, of the Ari HaKadosh, of the man that we've already spoken about, by Isaac Luria. He, the Ari, would write the name of God, Yod K, Vav K, in the Sefer Torah, and inside this Aron, those two Sefer Torah, which both stem back over 500 years, only taken out 3 times a year. We spell the letters Kasher. Kaf stands for Kippur, Shin stands for Shavuot, Reish stands for Rosh Hashanah. On those 3 days, they take out these Sefer Torah on the first Aron over here, and there's a big festivities over here in the synagogue when this takes place. But now we've got a whole issue here. What, the Abu Hab synagogue really transferred from Spain to this place over here? Everything was built the same way. So there's a bit of controversy here. But with Tzfat being the concept of this idea of the city of legends, what do we know about it? So we have to now go to another family that was known as the Abu Habs as well. There was a very great merchant that was here in the 17th century, and his son was the head of the Jewish community in Venice at the time as well. So they were a wealthy family of merchants. He arrived to the city of Tzfat, and they built here a synagogue in Tzfat called Abu Hab. Was this the one? Most possibly. But it could have stemmed back to a relation of his called the Abu Hab. Rabbi Yitzchak Abu Hab, the man who was in Spain, wrote a very famous book, which the Yemenites to this very day read every Shabbat. It's called Menorat HaMa'or. And that book as well deals with the Kabbalah, but deals with the idea of what the book stands for. The book is standing for the idea of working on you as a person. And by utilizing the things that we, unfortunately, many times slip up on. What we listen to, okay, the two ears that we have, what we watch, the 2 eyes, our 2 nostrils over here, and of course the mouth itself, how we speak. Menorat HaMa'or, his sefer works on all of that. The Yemenites, as we said, read it every Shabbat to this day. In the second Aron Kodesh that we have over here, these are Sefer Torah that stem back around about 100 years. And then you get to the third ones over here. And the third ones, if you don't mind coming this way, and the third ones over here are connected to another. Over here is the Genizah. Over here is the books of the Sidurim, Mashim, Sefer Torah, whatever else it may be, that we're unable to use. They're put in here to this day. But what is the source of this? So it doesn't just happen here. We have a Beit Knesset in Yerushalayim that's exactly the same. But one time, we know that during the Ottoman time period, when they're here from the 16th century until the 20th century, when the British take over, one of the things they demand at one time is that a Quran should be in a place of worship. What are you going to do? You're going to put it in the Aron Kodesh? See, they don't do that, and they build a secondary ark here for it, which would have been put there. We know that from Jerusalem as well, and a part of the time that was used here as well. I'm going to talk about that as well, the connection with the Ottomans with something that we're about to see over here. Now, many different things have happened here. The earthquakes that took place here, the 2 major earthquakes, one in the 16th century, one in the 19th century. Both of these, okay, especially in the 19th century, this part of the synagogue fell, but much of it stayed standing. And maybe it's connected so much to the Kabbalistic ideas that are in this synagogue. And even if you take it all the way through to the Second Lebanon War, there was a Katyusha that fell, which didn't explode right outside the synagogue. Synagogue stayed standing with all the nisim, with all the miracles that were here. But now, if you look at the shul itself, beautiful shul, everything has a symbol here. So the elders of Tzfat speak about the beauty of all the numbers that connect here. If you know the song, one is Hashem, one is Hashem, one is Hashem, never in the earth. So you know that from the Haggadah. Here as well, everything symbolizes that. We have the one central focus over here, the Bima, which connects to one is Hashem. Okay, we have two stairs that you can see going up, which is connected to the Shnei Luchot Havrit, the two tablets which the Torah was given on. We have the three Aronei Kodesh, the three arks, which are here, which we just spoke about now, where you have the Sifrei Torah from 500 years ago, Sifrei Torah from 100 years ago, and the Genizah. You have the four pillars, which you can make out over here as well. There are four pillars here, which are connected to the Alba Imahot, the four matriarchs. We have 5 places to sit on the Bima, which is connected to Chamisha Chumshei Torah. We have 6 pillars that surround it on the bottom, which are connected to the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, and the list goes on. The one that we're missing, by the way, is 11. Okay, we don't seem to have that, but we do have 12 windows around the synagogue, okay, which are connected, of course, to the 12 Shvatim. Now, I want to take you over to this place over here to show you one last thing. Here, come this way. So as you can see, we're in a beautiful Sephardi synagogue. And the way you can partly tell that is the way that people sit. Look at how people sit here. They're facing, these people are facing these people on this side. Okay, as you can now see. We don't sit facing a person's back like we do in an Ashkenazi synagogue very often. I know there are other Ashkenazi synagogues we have seats in different ways, but usually you're facing a person's back. And I think that's very, very connected to the warmth that you feel always, okay, in a Sephardi family. But one of those things that really dominated me when I came into this place over here, the Abu Hab, for the first time, was something that my father taught me. And for that, I'm going to ask you to come up onto the bima with me over here. So as you climb these steps, okay, of the bima, which you take you up to the top, you can see over here, as you can look now towards the roof, the camera can point towards the roof, you'll be able to notice a number of things. Number one is we can see the musical instruments that surround this whole area over here. These are the instruments that the Levi'im used in the Beit HaMikdash. The Levites will play in the Beit HaMikdash. If we go back to the story that we spoke about with the Ottomans, you can see straight ahead of us now is Makom Beit HaMikdash. It says the place of where the temple stood. We rarely see, if we're going to talk about the temple, not a picture of the temple. But you don't want to offend anybody when this is built. Okay, so they put the Mizgada, well, actually, Kipat Selah, the dome of the rock, that you can see over here. Makom Beit HaMikdash is the place of the temple. You can see the 12 tribes, which again surround above the musical instruments, the roof. But then at the very top here is something which I think is a great lesson to each and every one of us. Pirkei Avot speaks about the crowns that we have. We have a crown of Krova Yeshua, we have a crown of Malchut, of kingship, we have a crown of Torah, we have a crown of priesthood, and then in the corner over here is what I think we need to live our lives by. It says, Keter Shem Tov, the crown of a good name. The crown of a good name. It says, Keter Shem Tov Ole al Gabehem. The crown of having a good name is above all the rest of the crowns of salvation, of priesthood, of Torah, of kingship. It's above them all. That we should carry with us, that crown of a good name, the name that the Abu Hav, Rabbi Yitzchak Abu Hav, gave to his children, who passed it on to so many others. And that story is still being performed in this Beit Knesset every single day. From here, we're going to take you to another.
Okay, we're going to carry on now just down the path from the Abu Hav. As you turn left from there, you're going to hit the next Beit Knesset called the Al-Shich. Much of Tzfat, by the way, as you're going to learn as well, was destroyed by the earthquakes. And one of the organizations that I worked for, which was called Livnotu Libanot, were involved in building many of the ruins that were there, including one right opposite the Al-Shich. The Al-Shich is a very famous person who writes commentaries on the Torah, but let's listen to what he's known for.
So we've now arrived to the Al-Sheikh shul. The Al-Sheikh was a rabbi who was here at the same time as the Ari. He was actually has a lot of interactions with the Ari. I'm going to talk about a little bit about it as well. It was probably one of the first shuls that we had standing in all of Tzfat. And one of the reasons that we know it is because there's no women's gallery here. The women weren't coming to shul in the 15th century or the 16th century when this shul was built in the 16th century. The Al-Sheikh himself is well known for his commentaries on all of the Torah. Please, you can pass in front of us. Okay? Well known for his commentaries on all of the Torah. He didn't really deal with Kabbalah, although he did want to be known as a Kabbalist. And he asked the Ari if the Ari doesn't mind teaching him Kabbalah. The Ari said, listen, there are people that are here for Durash, people that are here to be able to teach Torah, and there are people that are here for Sod, people that are here to be able to teach the secrets of Judaism, which is Kabbalah. You are here to teach the Torah. That's what you're here to do. It is known as the Istanbuli synagogue, and that is because Turkish Jews did come here, and we have a crown of a Torah. Listen to this. We have a crown of Torah from the 15th century here. So just up the road in the Abu Hab, we have two of the oldest Sifrei Torah in the world, one written by Rabbi Yitzchak Abu Hav, and one, of course, by the Sofer Stam of the Ari. In this synagogue over here, we have the crown of the Torah, okay, from 1434 from Istanbul. Amazing. It was also known as the synagogue of Ba'alei Tshuva, okay, of people that had returned to Judaism, and that is probably because of it being the first synagogue here. Because remember, we're talking about a synagogue that's in the 16th century, from the time of the Al-Sheikh. Please, if we talk about a synagogue coming from the time of the 16th century, then we're dealing here with a story of something else that we know so well. Remember, the Jews in Spain were anusim. Many of them managed to stay in Spain. They were anusim, people who we call it in English, and it's a terrible derogatory term, called Marranos. Jews that had to hide their Judaism, and from there, if you want, make all these new customs to be able to continue being Jewish, but in hiding. Those that managed to get out wanted to be able to come back and be able to rebuild their Jewish life. And so this became one of the first synagogues of Ba'alei Tshuva, of the Jews returning from that time after Gerush Tzfat, after the expulsion of Spain, returning to this place over here. So again, we have the story of the Al-Sheikh, probably the first place where people were praying here. But at that same time, there's a man who is in the city of Tzfat, who's just over 80, when the Ari arrives here to be able to teach Kabbalah in 1570. That man is a man named Rabbi Yosef Caro, who we're about to go to his shul right now.
So Rabbi Yosef Caro, who literally is around the corner to the Al-Sheikh, will change Judaism. But because of him, they'll be able to do a number of different things. And I'm just going to link it quickly to the Al-Sheikh. If you remember, unfortunately, the Crusades caused major problems for the whole Jewish world. Women, unfortunately, were terribly treated and raped. And there were many of the men that were killed. And that went on for a few hundred years, actually, with the various different things that took place. In Tzfat, they wanted to be able to give more lenience to allow people who unfortunately have gone through this terrible episodes to be able to convert to Judaism. And they actually managed to sway much of the world, the Jewish world, to follow them as well. And it's because of the giants that were living there, including the man that you're going to be introduced to now, Rabbi Yosef Caro, who again was over 80 when the Ari arrived to the city of Tzfat, but he will become one of his Mekubalim, one of his Kabbalists. Here's Rabbi Yosef Caro.
The reason I've come into this sort of dark courtyard over here is just to tell you one small story connected to Rabbi Yosef Caro that we're going to go into his shul. I hope it's open for us. And that is this. We're in the area of his house. He lived on the bottom floor. His shul was on the top floor, okay, which we can now sort of see the wall is going up, right, to where the shul once was. But the reason that we're here is to tell you about a minhag that some of you know, a custom that some of you know. You know, there's only really one night in Judaism where they talk about staying up all night. And lo and behold, that is not Shavuot. That is somebody shemisaper sipor yitziat mitzrayim, somebody who tells the story of the Jews, of the exodus of the Jews from Egypt. Harei zeh mishubach, it says, that person is praiseworthy. When is that? It's on the night after a night of Seder night, to be able to stay up on as long as possible to tell the story of what took place in Egypt. But we, the Jewish people, have a different custom, and that custom is, of course, staying up all night on Shavuot. How old is this custom? When did it start? So it actually stems back to the place we're in right now. Shavuot, of course, as you know, the giving of the Torah, the Jews had 3 days around Mount Sinai where they were told to abstain from many different things and to get ready for the coming of the Torah. Before the Torah is given, the Medrash tells us that Moses had to go and wake up the Jewish people. Moshe had to wake up his people. How's it possible? The Torah is about to be given. You should be so excited. How is it possible you fell asleep? So in order, if you want to turn over what took place in Mount Sinai, we stay up all night. But again, that doesn't tell us where it comes from. It comes from where we stand right now. Rabbi Yosef Caro, a man who we're going to be introduced to in a few moments, a great rabbi at the time, used to learn with his chavruta the words of Kabbalah as well. All of a sudden, it's told to us on the night of Shavuot, he was speaking, and out of his voice, out of his throat, came a heavenly voice telling secrets of the Torah. They realized that if this is the night that you can reach such heights when you learn Torah, surely on this night we should be staying up all night. Surely we should be getting ready for the giving of Torah. And that is why we have something called Tikkun Leil Shavuot, where we stay up and we letaken what took place. We fix what happened on the night of Shavuot by learning Torah on that evening. It took place right where we are right now with a man called Rabbi Yosef Caro, who we're going to go into, hopefully, his shul. So we're standing outside of Rabbi Yosef Caro's synagogue. Unfortunately, it's closed. Again, Corona, there's no guarantees what will be open, what isn't open. This road that we're on should be the busiest road of Tzfat, should be packed with tourists. There's no one here. Okay, really absolutely empty, and it's very sad to see, even though we've seen a couple of groups today, but nothing like it really should be. Anyway, let's go back to the story of Rabbi Yosef Caro. Who is Rabbi Yosef Caro, and what took place here? Rabbi Yosef Caro is another one of these people that come out of Spain, finally arrived to the city of Tzfat, but he's much, much more famous for something else that takes place, and that's this. In the city of Tzfat, he is head of the Bet Din. He is head of the Jewish High Court here in the city of Tzfat. Rabbi Yosef Caro is more famous for this, even though he learned Kabbalah with the Ari. And that is because he took if you want, what was taking place around the world, and he understood that there was a real problem around the world. Jews had been dispersed from Spain. Jews had been dispersed from Portugal. Jews were being sent in various different places. How did they know which halacha to look after, to do? Well, how did they know how to keep Jewish law? And so what Rabbi Yosef Caro took upon himself was this. He was going to write a compendium of Jewish laws. Now, at the same time, in the city of Krakow is another man. His name is Rabbi Moshe Isserles. Moshe Isserles at that time is in Krakow thinking the same thing. Jews are dispersed all over the place. How do they know which halacha to keep? Let's write a compendium of laws. Rabbi Yosef Caro is writing it, or Moshe Isserles is writing it. 1 second. Moshe Isserles is writing it. Even though we have letters back and forth between the two, for some reason they don't tell each other completely what they're working on. Rabbi Yosef Caro's book, known as the Bet Yosef, comes out first. And it's partly because of the idea there were printing presses in Meron, Nachal Meron, the riverbed that runs to where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's grave is. These printing presses were able to produce the books before the ones in Krakow. The book arrives to Krakow. Rabbi Moshe Isserles looks at the book, cannot believe it. He's worked over 9 years on this book. Can't believe the fact that this has come out in the city of Tzfat. As he goes to look through different things, he sees there's big differences. And the difference mainly is that Rabbi Yosef Caro comes from a world of Judaism that is known as the Sephardi Jewish world. Rabbi Moshe Isserles comes from the Ashkenazi Jewish world. And we know there are different ways to keep things. Just think about the most basic thing, which is Pesach. How we keep Pesach, Ashkenazim, how we keep Pesach, Sephardim, what we eat. Very different. Back and forward they go with different ideas until finally But Moshe Isserles decides he's not bringing out his own book called Darchei Moshe. What he's going to do is he's going to join the two together. He is going to allow the Beit Yosef to come out, one known as the Shulchan Aruch, the set table, and the Moshe Isserles is going to write a commentary known as the Mapah, the tablecloth, which will beautify the table, beautify Jewish law, unite the Jewish people in one. Rabbi Yosef Caro, an incredible figure here, who also wanted to bring back the original idea of smicha, of how to ordain rabbis, all the way back to the Talmudic time period. He lived, he breathed, he learned, and he prayed in this building behind us. This is the story of a man that will literally change the Jewish world. Him, and if you want, his partner, Moshe Isserles in Krakow, they will completely change the Jewish world come the 16th century. Now just think about that. What is happening here in Tzfat? Look at the giants that we're having here. Think about what is happening in the 16th century. Judaism is coming out of one of the most enlightened periods, an amazing period, in the Spanish time period when the Jews are living in Spain. Think about the rabbis, that came out of Spain. But then everything came crashing down with that decree that comes from the Alhambra, and the Jews are expelled from Spain. And as we said, 5 years later, expelled from Portugal, even though the Inquisition will continue on in Portugal, as well as it will in Spain. How do you pick up and put the pieces back together? Well, you need giants. And one of those is a man like Rabbi Yosef Caro, who's behind us. His shul, from here, the Jewish world of Halacha poems.
Okay, we are now going to be learning a little bit of what took place in Tzfat from that time period onwards. You know, even when we deal with Jerusalem, we talk about a sort of dark period in Jewish history, which is really where after the Jews have left or been kicked out of that area after after the Byzantine period, until the Jews start to come back. Well, Jews, as we said, were back and forward in the city of Tzfat much longer than they were in Jerusalem. But there was a dark period. There was a period where very few Jews were left in the city of Tzfat. And it came down to a number of things, but one of them is connected to how the land is made up, the geography of the land, and to the earthquakes that will take place, which you're about to see now evidence of in the video. And I'm going to ask Rabbi Levine just to continue into the last video, which will take you into the story of the War of Independence, with the Jews managing to be able to defeat the Arabs and stay in Tzfat. You should just understand as well, there was another period in between, the famous riots that took place in Hebron in 1929 that we dealt with last week. They took place in Tzfat as well. 27 Jews were murdered in Tzfat in the 1929 riots. So we're going to watch now the period which deals with the earthquake, and we'll jump straight into the last period that deals with the War of Independence.
So we're standing here now in the city of Tzfat to be able to show you what the city of Tzfat went through. Of course, we've already spoken about the earthquake that we spoke about with the Avrich. But when we stand here, we can also see remnants of the other earthquake that took place here in the 19th century, in the 1830s, when there was a major earthquake that moved most of the population of Tzfat out of here, and it sent them towards Jerusalem. Those of you that are familiar with Jerusalem and the building of the new beautiful synagogue in Jerusalem of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, it's because of people from Tzfat who came there, and they basically took over the synagogue. The Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, who had arrived 100 years earlier and had built that synagogue, but people from Tzfat came in after the earthquake and lived there, never to come back to their homes. However, as they rebuild the city of Tzfat, they're trying to find what was once here after the earthquake in the 19th century. In effect, when you build other people's houses in Tzfat, you dig down, you're finding the remnants even from the time period of the 17th century earthquake that took place here as well. How are these earthquakes happening? So you're sitting in a region that has over 300 earthquakes a year. Thankfully, not major earthquakes on the Richter scale, but we do have one of those every 100 years, pretty much, which makes a major damage in the area. The last one, of course, bringing down some of Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. This region that we're sitting in Israel, sits on a tectonic rift valley. The tectonic rift valley is between Kenya in the south and Turkey in the north. The side which is on the eastern side of the tectonic rift valley runs through Jordan, and the side on the western side of the tectonic rift valley runs through Israel. What it does is it moves the country like this. The Rift Valley moves like this, which pushes the eastern side north and the southern side, the western side south, like this, pushing it up and down. At one time, it didn't just go up and down. It went side to side. And then two sinking holes were there. A sinking hole in the south is called the Dead Sea. A sinking hole in the north is called the Kinneret. The Dead Sea, of course, is over 420 meters below sea level, and the Kinneret is over 220 meters below sea level. All part of their tectonic rift valley. Because it moves the whole time, this valley, there's a lot of activity here. And Tzfat have paid a major price on that. 2 major earthquakes that have destroyed the city twice, but they have rebuilt themselves. There was another terrible thing that nearly brought the city to its knees, and that's our next stop now, connecting us to the War of Independence. Come 1948, we have a whole different story. There are only 2,000 Jews left in Tzfat in 1948, and there are 10,000 Arabs. We know the battle is going to be very fierce, but Jews from Tzfat were determined that they were not going to leave their city. The British, who were here at the time in April, wanted to be able to evacuate all the women and children from here. The Jews of Tzfat said no, under their chief rabbi, who also told the British, we're not moving here. Even though the British brought buses to this place to put the women and children on it, not one woman, not one child got on the bus. They refused to leave their beloved city of Tzfat. 2,000 of them. They put together a force of people who were made up of women, children, and men from all of the units that were trying to defend Israel. That means even the Haganah, and of course the Lechi and the Etzel. These underground groups, one of them of Menachem Begin's, who never really joined together and joined forces, but here in Tzfat they did. The British will leave, and all of a sudden they will hear the sound of the Palmach coming in. 300 forces from the Palmach came in, singing the song of the Palmach as they arrived here, and brought great relief to this city over here. On May 9th of 1948, during the Yiftach Brigade's operation in the Galilee, they managed to attack Tzfat and hold on to places in Tzfat. During that time, they managed to get to places that the British have given to the Arabs. They gave all the strategic places to the Arabs, including the police station that we'll see later on, and this place over here called the Matsuda, with its view that you see over here. Took a lot, but finally the Haganah and the forces managed to get them back. They overturned what history had basically written for them, that Tzfat was going to fall into the hands of the Arabs. And with that and the Davidka missile, they managed to push back the threat. And then finally, to rebuild their beloved city. So we're now standing here. This place over here is the last, if you want, outpost of the Jews in 1948. Because if we can ask their camera to swing around past the building site now, all the way 180 degrees, keep going around 180 degrees, and you'll be able to see now the mosque straight ahead of us. And again, we said earlier on in the video that Abu Mazin once lived in this place. He lived on that side of the city. But let's come back now to the view over here by the Belmont Gallery over here. It's now showing us what took place here in 1948. Because in 1948, when we come here, you can see how this building itself is riddled with bullet holes everywhere. We were overrun in the city of Tzfat, as we were in so many other places around Israel. Remember, 1948, the battle, which actually is going to start in 1947, Kaftet November, the 29th of November, 1947, the UN are going to have a vote, which is then going to proclaim that the Jews themselves can have a state. That is when the War of Independence is going to break out. Not after the Declaration of Independence in 1948. It's going to get much more severe at that time. but it's going to break out at that time in 1947. The Jews are going to be surrounded here, not only by their neighbors over here from the Arab area of Tzfat, but also from the villages that surround this place over here. And we're going to have to try and get the people up here. Plus, there's another problem. Because in 1947, when all this is taking place, the British are still in town. And with the British being here, they take the side not of the Jews, but of the Arabs that are here. And so you can't get reinforcements up to this place over here. To this day, for those of you who have kids who are in Bnei Akiva, or you may have been in Bnei Akiva itself, one of the most important sites of Bnei Akiva in Israel is a site called Biria, which is actually north of where we're standing, but only by a couple of kilometers, where Bnei Akiva once met to come up to the city of Tzfat to save it, to be able to help, okay, at various different times. The Biria story is connected where the British wouldn't let the Jews come to this place over here and bring in reinforcements to this area over here. But if we come back now to the story of the War of Independence, the War of Independence, as we said, the people are outnumbered. How are we going to save Tzfat? We don't have enough arms. We don't have enough Haganah here. So how are we going to do it? They bring in the famous missile, okay, that was known as the Davidka. This is standing today in the square in Jerusalem, right by Machane Yehuda. It's brought to this place over here as well. Remember what the Davidka does. It's a mortar, where you would expect does huge damage, but the mortar actually doesn't fire anything. It just makes a complete noise. And that noise scared off the people of Tzfat, even up to the point that many of them fled from here, then surrendering, and the Jews were able to save the city of Tzfat. But they did pay a heavy price, and you can see that, by the way, from the building itself. The buildings were totally destroyed, many of them, from mortar fire from the Arabs. They didn't care about the fact that we're dealing with a city that's over 500 years old. And you can also see the testament of that in the cemetery, which is down in the valley that we can't see from here, where the military cemetery is also placed, which unfortunately took a number of people's lives for trying to save the city of Tzfat where we are today.
Okay. Rabbi Levine, that was the end of the video. So if you're here, it'd be good we can take questions now.
Of course I'm here, Tzvi.
There you are.
That was amazing. Gosh, took me way back. Haven't been to Tzfat for a few years. So what a beautiful city. And thank you for taking us. Sorry that the shuls were closed. Wow. Very frustrating and very sad, I suppose. How a lot of the I'm assuming sort of like in the artist colony and all those kind of places, they're just really suffering. A kol sagul, everything's closed.
Yeah, everything's closed, including the mikveh of the Ari.
Wow. Maybe, in fact, do you want to just explain a little bit about the mikveh of the Ari as a first question?
So the mikveh is a very special mikveh. The fact is, there's something called the mikveh of the Ari, which stands outside of the cemetery in Tzfat. The Ari.
Bottom, no?
Sorry, at the very bottom.
Right at the bottom, yeah.
Yeah, it's just above the cemetery. The cemetery goes below that. So the mikveh itself is from a natural spring, and therefore it is very, very cold. And they say that if you go into the Ari's mikveh, the legend is that you will do tshuva, you will repent before you die. That's what the legend speaks about. I will say, and again, I'm known for, if you want, breaking myths as well, and people not getting very not liking that. But I will say that the mikveh of the Ari today may well not be the mikveh that the Ari actually used in the 16th century. It's a possibility, okay, that the mikveh of the Ari we might have now found in the center of the city of Tzfat, because we found now another mikveh from the 16th century right there, very close to his shul. Even though this one is very close to the Sephardi shul, today a lot of people are saying that it could well be a place where tahara was done on bodies, okay? And therefore you would have repented before you die.
The place that there's been found, it's a mikveh that also had a tahara. It was also because they needed...
no, it's a mikveh bang in the city of Tzfat, so they've never done a tahara there, okay?
Where were the... Are you saying the... So when the taharas were done where...
and I have to show you those.
Okay. That's for next time. So I've got a few questions to ask you. You mentioned something to do with you alluded to the Second Lebanon War, and its connection with Tzfat. Can you just you alluded to it? Can you just explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Okay. So Tzfat, as I'm sure that all of us are aware, the Hezbollah sat on the borders, and they didn't need to actually sit on the borders because they had missiles that they say today, for instance, no problem to hit Tel Aviv. Their stockpile of missiles, but they were hitting Haifa, they were hitting the whole of the north. If you remember, the north evacuated and went south during that time. In Tzfat, because the population is quite poor, everyone was able to get up and leave. That's number one. And number two is because if we talk just a little bit about the makeup of the population, if we can, the population is made up of a lot of immigrants. And you alluded to that as well with where you went taught in schools, okay, in Tzfat. We have a lot of Ethiopians that came to Tzfat when they made Aliyah. We have a lot of B'nai Menashe. Those are the people that came from India, okay, to Tzfat. And also Russians, okay, they came to Tzfat as well. The ones that didn't have jobs beforehand, they came to Tzfat. And it's quite a poor area. And it didn't mean that they always had people to help them. Now, you should know that I live in Bet Shemesh, and Bet Shemesh opened its doors just like so many other communities during the Second Lebanon War. People were sleeping on people's floors, in their beds. Every school was opened to be able to make sure that we could accommodate all of the north. And we're talking about a third of the population moving south, okay, during the battle. There were a lot of miracles that took place in the city of Tzfat. Katyusha rockets and their missiles going straight through buildings, straight through apartments, and the whole family being fine. In one side, out the other. Okay. We have a whole family from the absorption center that was hit. The actual Aliyah absorption center was hit. They were all safe. And thankfully, I have to say that during the Second Lebanon War, even though Tzfat took a beating from the amount of missiles that landed in the area there, the people were safe. And they say it's bizkut in the merit of all those famous rabbis that are buried there in the cemetery.
Wow, amazing. So you spoke about the sort of the diversity of the type of people that live there. Can you just tell us a little bit more about from a Jewish aspect, what kind of people live in Tzfat? Is it a cross section of Israel, or is it particularly leaning towards any particular grouping of people?
Okay, so if you ask the mayor today of Tzfat, he'll tell you that Tzfat has really, if you want, gone to the right. Okay, there's a lot of people who would consider themselves, if you want to label people today, Charedim, that are moving up to Tzfat. Of course, the Baal Teshuvah movement, that means the people who are returning to Judaism, is very, very big in Tzfat. A lot of people going out to Tzfat to be able to take in, as I said at the beginning, the atmosphere and take in that idea. Part of Chassidut is called Hitbodadut, to go out and meet your maker in nature. And what better place to do that than in the city of Tzfat, without the hassle and the bustle of our other major cities. So Tzfat has become very much, if you want, at least the old city of Tzfat, quite religious from that perspective, which has made a number of people, unfortunately, feel a little less comfortable to live there. They've moved, the artists themselves, there's an artist colony as well. And then the newer part of Tzfat, which is not connected to the older part. And what do I mean by that? There's an old city, there's then the artist colony, and then there's the old part which was built, but then there's a newer part down the bottom. The old part that is built is very, very poor neighborhoods. Poor neighborhoods of people who are on low income, unfortunately. And Tzfat has never been able to lift itself out of that, unfortunately. But the newer part now, which is down the bottom, which overlooks the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret, you're getting other people that have decided to make their houses in the north. I'll just add one last point to this by saying the north itself is going to get an injection of people living there. And that's very much down to Corona.
Really?
People don't want to be living in apartments in big cities at the present moment any longer, because they saw what lockdown did here. If you were living in an apartment, you had no balcony or whatever it may be, you couldn't get out. Those people that are living up north, that have more room to live because the land is much cheaper and you can afford to buy something, more within your means, it will mean that it will allow people to move to the more rural areas and hopefully give an injection into those places. And adding to that, that now we sort of see that so much work can be done online and not in an office. You're seeing you're seeing interest in the whole of the north today.
Wow, thank you for that. So you're going to go and live in Tzfat, just out of interest?
I don't think so, but I do love the place. truly love it.
It is wonderful. Another question I've had in is there's a slightly confused question, but I think I know what it might be alluding to. Maybe you can explain. So is there a connection, in the original Aliyah to Israel, sort of Herzl time, pre-Herzl even, people moving to Israel way pre-state, before World Wars even. Now, is there a connection with Tzfat, particularly in that story?
Okay, so whoever sent in that question, yeah, very good on knowing their history. So in 1882, of course, is the Aliyah, the first Aliyah of the Jews to the land of Israel. Now, even though we have an Aliyah before that, from the pupils of a man known as the Gaon Vilna. Okay, the Vilna Gaon, his pupils made Aliyah much earlier than that. And many of them, of course, will move to Jerusalem and to the city of Tzfat.
What year is the Vilna Gaon?
We're talking about in the 1850s onwards. That's happening. Yeah. Okay, the Gaon Vilna's pupils are making Aliyah. And again, just like at the time of the Ari, people felt that the Messiah was coming, the Mashiach was on his way. How can it be that we had that catastrophe, okay, which was the catastrophe of the Spanish Inquisition, the expulsion of Spain, and the same thing, which was, if you want, the pogroms that took place as well in Eastern Europe, that spearheaded this idea of Chassidut, and also then spearheaded, if you want, the Vilna Gaon's famous controversies with Chassidut, but his people made Aliyah, came to Israel. Now, I'm sure that many of us have seen pictures of Chalutzim, pioneers. And if you see those pictures of Chalutzim, you see this guy in a vest, okay, carrying a turia, one of these spades on his back. Okay, you see these girls in these shorts, okay, going out to the fields and destoning, whatever else it may be. Very nice. But those aren't the original pioneers. The original pioneers are the Charedim, those that would be considered today, if you want, people in black hats and black coats with peyot and beards from the city of Tzfat. They're the original ones. They're the ones that came down the hill and settled Rosh Pinah. If you know, you come down from Tzfat, you go down the hill, you get to Rosh Pinah, which of course is bought by Baron Rothschild. Yeah, that's right, a windy road.
It depends which way you come in, either from the wrong side or from the other side. Sorry, Caro.
Bought by Baron Rothschild. And it was down to them. They decided that they realized there was something there. The people from Tzfat, those Jews who had come earlier on, went down the hill because they noticed there were mulberry bushes. And there are still, by the way, mulberry bushes in the city of Tzfat and in Rosh Pinah. And mulberry bushes don't just give you the fruit, but mulberry bushes attract something. And that, of course, is silkworms. And they produce the silk then. You get it from a mulberry bush. But the problem was the people didn't know how to extract the silk from the tree, from the bush itself. So it failed, but they're the original people to start farming the land, to realize that what the land could give. And if you want, they're the original people to understand that famous idea at the end of the Tractate of Ketubot that talks about the idea that the land will be barren until the Jews come back. And when the Jews start to arrive back to the land, it will start to flower. Remember, you see that so clearly when Mark Twain arrives to the land of Israel and he writes that famous book called The Innocents Abroad. He speaks so derogatory about Israel. Cannot take it. It says the land is disaster. But he writes it before the kibbutzim started to do their job. And he writes it before the pioneers started to do their job in the north. The land now blossoms because the Jews have returned to their homeland.
Wow. What a story. Actually, one from me here. I remember, isn't there a story of an alleyway that overlooks the mountains so the Mashiach's going to come straight up through that? Or have I made that up totally from 20 years ago?
It's Mashiach. Okay, it's called the alleyway of the Mashiach, and there's an old lady there who serves tea. Okay,
Still there, huh?
she's still there, and she
How
stays.
about 250?
So yeah, something like eternal. Okay, and she states that the Mashiach's going to come through that place. Again, we have the legend that the Mashiach will arrive to the Bet Knesset that is above Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's grave. If you ever go there, come to Tzfat with me. I'll take you there. But there's a ledge, if you want, the lintel of the Bet Knesset, which is 2,000 years old, is still standing, and there's a big crack through it. The legend is if you can break the crack by dancing on the top, the Mashiach will arrive. I've tried it. But it's that's the legend of Simtat HaMashiach, the lane of the Mashiach in the city of Tzfat. Wow. There's so much more to show in Tzfat, but for that you have to come back to Israel, and God willing, we'll be able to do that in person.
The last question then is that I've had in is, what would you recommend for people to do that want to come to Tzfat? Obviously not today, this week, or next week, but if it highly recommend speaking to JRoots and making sure you get a guide, either Tzvi or one of your amazing team of guides. But if you're not going to have a guide and you're just going to turn up,
okay, my suggestion is not to do this in one day, and my suggestion for a few reasons. Number one is you want to taste the wine of Tzfat, so you don't want to have to be driving after you've been drinking. That's firstly. Okay, outstanding wine, and there was good cuisine there at different times as well, which unfortunately is all closed because of Corona. But
where's the winery? Where's the winery?
So right by the Simtat Abu Hav is the Abu Hav winery. Okay, one of them. There's more than that, but one of them is there, and I have actually pressed the grapes for the bottles 2 years ago, which was a lot of fun. A man called Yigal, who was a Bal Teshuvah as well, somebody who returned to, if you want, to his religion. He was a music director, very interesting guy. He has a 16th century winery. Still has the wine cellars from the 16th century that were there. Wow. So in the same place, he's built this winery. It's fantastic to see. So we have that. But the history itself isn't just what we showed you on the video. There's plenty more. And even that stems all the way back to Jacob. We didn't get to that, but the Shaman Ava Yeshiva, which is where Jacob was supposed to have learnt, they say is in the city of Tzfat. That's standing there as well. I mean, but there's plenty to do in the area of Tzfat, staying in Tzfat. If you can be there over Shabbat, the atmosphere is incredible. And there are very nice places to stay as well. So that is my suggestion, to really make it an overnight tour, not just a quick in and out.
Wow. So yeah, I think our time is
beautiful. And I will say one of the things that I was going to add to the video, which I didn't do, if you don't mind, I went to the Kinneret for you to see a Galilee, and I'll send it to you so you can put it up on Belmont on your website, whatever it is, just to show you how full the Kinneret is this year. Okay, I haven't seen it that way for 20 years. Really, it's incredible to see.
Of course, people, I'm sure you all understand and will appreciate that the water supply, the water source that the Kinneret provides for the country is essential. And every year we worry that level's dropping. And to hear you say that it's not only rising, but it's actually got to a point where it's really holding. It's so integral for the sustenance of the country and for the economy and everything that the water for the Kinneret provides. So please send me that. If you send me that, I'll post that in the Belmont group so people can see that in our group. Tzvi, I think that's probably our time this evening. I think everyone will agree that having had Hebron with you last week and Tzfat with you this week, they're all going to be saying, "What's next?" And they're going to be banging my door down to say, "You've got to speak to Tzvi and JRoots." And maybe after the summer, we'll talk about potentially doing another tour with you. We'd love to. I get no commission, but I highly recommend. I can put you in touch with Tzvi and his team. If you go to Israel and you want to advice or guides, where to go and people to take you around, and as you've seen with both of these places, you can go to them yourselves if you want. but to go with someone that really knows. And we only got a taste of what Tzfat's really about. If you go to these places with someone that really knows, who can not just guide you and tell you, but inspire and just open up a world of history, then you've got to go with someone, hopefully from JRoots or anyone else that knows what they're doing as well. I think Tzvi would
Thank
agree.
you very much.
Thank you to JRoots. Thank you for joining us and being a part of our heritage tours. And for those of you that had booked to come with us to Poland, the trip in May, Tzvi was going to be our guide, and we were having a chat. It's a bit early to book another trip right now, but as soon as we get a window, an opportunity to, we think it's going to be safe to start booking some time, Tzvi, please God, we'll be together in Poland in the not too distant future to go to some of the places that you even mentioned tonight. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you once again to Tzvi and Zach at JRoots and the whole team for putting that together and allowing me to learn how to be a TV producer as well, which is fantastic. And have a wonderful evening. Thank you for tuning. Tomorrow night, if you're around anyone on Facebook, you will get Zoom and Facebook. You'll get a fantastic share from Rabbi Rosler. Loads more things coming our way in the coming weeks. All the very best. Have a lovely evening. Erev Laila Tov. And thank you once again to Tzvi.
Thank you very much.
All the very best.